There's a strange moment that happens when someone feels weak, when rejection, humiliation, or fear grips them, and they instinctively decide to act tough. Their shoulders tighten, their tone hardens, their words become sharp, almost metallic. They believe they're protecting themselves, but in truth, something deeper is happening. They're not defending strength, they're disguising fragility. It's a paradox that defines much of our modern world. The more we pretend to be strong, the weaker we actually become, because every performance of toughness distances us from the very source of real power, our ability to face truth without flinching. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this better than most. He's often remembered as the prophet of manipulation and control, the man who taught rulers to be feared rather than loved. But few people ever read The Prince carefully enough to notice what Machiavelli was really doing. He wasn't glorifying deception. He was warning about dependence on illusion. He saw that those who act powerful eventually collapse under the weight of their own disguise. Real strength, he suggested, comes not from pretending to be untouchable, but from understanding human nature, especially your own, without vanity, without denial. This video will explore that paradox, why acting tough may be the most self-destructive thing we can do, and what Machiavelli, along with thinkers like Jung, Nietzsche, and Socrates, can teach us about the difference between performative strength and authentic power. Over the next hour, we'll unpack 6 core insights, 6 lenses through which to see how false strength erodes the soul, how vulnerability becomes wisdom, and why every great mind eventually comes to the same realization. That courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to hide from it. So let's begin, not by trying to seem strong, but by daring to understand what strength truly is. There's an image that has followed humanity for centuries. The warrior in armor, steel plates, polished to a mirror shine, the gunkunnomens, that's a symbol of courage, of power, of control. But have you ever noticed how heavy armor is? How exhausting it must be to wear it every hour, every day? Most of us are walking through life in invisible armor. We don't carry swords or shields, but we do carry postures, the stoic expression, the detached tone, the carefully managed silence. We tell ourselves it's strength, when in reality, it's fear dressed in discipline. Because strength, in its pure form, doesn't need to appear strong. Only fear does. Machiavelli saw this clearly. In The Prince, he described rulers who obsessed over their image of power, their ability to seem unshakable, decisive, even ruthless. But the irony was that this obsession often made them fragile. They could never rest. Every moment became a performance. Every smile, every gesture, every silence had to be calculated. And so, the appearance of control became the cause of constant anxiety. He warned that leaders who rely solely on fear build on the wind. Their stability depends not on their own virtue or wisdom, but on maintaining an illusion that others believe. When that illusion cracks, even for a moment, the entire structure collapses. Now, we might think, I are STEM, not a ruler, and STEM just trying to survive. But the same law applies to us. Whenever we act tough, to hide hurt, to win an argument, to seem unaffected, we're really saying, I don't trust that who I am is enough. We're afraid that softness means weakness, that sincerity invites humiliation, that being real will cost us respect. But consider this, What if the opposite is true? What if the world's respect follows those who no longer chase it? Carl Jung wrote that the persona, the mask we wear, is necessary to function in society, but when we mistake that mask for the self, we become trapped inside it. The more we protect our image, the less we grow. Imagine a tree wrapped in iron bands, trying to look unbreakable. It can't move, can't expand, can't reach toward the light. The armor it thought would protect it becomes the very thing that suffocates it. Acting tough feels safe in the short term because it shields us from immediate pain, but over time, it hardens us against joy, connection, and creativity. You can't selectively numb emotion. If you block vulnerability, you block love too. Real strength begins when we start removing that armor, one layer at a time. When we dare to say, I don't ever need to win this conversation. I can admit that hurt me. I don't have to act like I splurrum fine when I splurrum not. That's not weakness. That's integrity. It's alignment between inner and outer life. Machiavelli may have been a political realist, but beneath his pragmatism was a deep psychological truth. You cannot command what you secretly fear. If you fear vulnerability, it will command you. If you fear being seen, you'll live to impress shadows. So ask yourself, what would it feel like to put the armor down? To stop performing toughness and start living courage? The answer is unsettling because it means surrendering the illusion of control. But that's where all true power begins, not in domination, but in self-knowledge. When you stop hiding your fear, it loses its power over you. And the mask of strength, that heavy, exhausting disguise, finally falls away, revealing something infinitely stronger underneath, quiet confidence, grounded in truth. There's a moment, usually in our 20s or 30s, when we start to realize that the things we've spent years hiding don't actually go away. The anger we suppress, the sadness we avoid, the fear we deny, they don't vanish. They wait. They wait patiently, quietly in the corners of our psyche, until one day they return, disguised, distorted, and demanding to be seen. Carl Jung called this part of us the shadow, the side we exile to maintain our image of control. But repression is never neutral. Whatever we push down doesn't die, it grows roots in the dark. And when we act tough, when we wear the armor of invulnerability, we are in essence declaring war on our own shadow. We silence the part of us that feels afraid, that longs for love, that trembles when it's alone. We tell it, you are not welcome here. And yet, that very rejection becomes the seed of our future downfall. Because what we repress doesn't simply disappear, it starts to express itself indirectly, through bitterness, through sarcasm, through the need to dominate or prove ourselves. It becomes the hidden puppeteer, pulling the strings of our personality. Machiavelli's insight into power mirrors this perfectly. He wrote that a prince who cannot govern his own impulses will eventually lose control of his kingdom. And what are our lives if not small kingdoms, filled with ambitions, fears, loyalties, and betrayals? If we cannot govern our inner realm, what hope do we have of mastering the outer one? Consider the person who prides themselves on being calm and in control. They never show anger, never raise their voice, never reveal a crack in their composure, but beneath that serenity may live decades of unexpressed rage. And one day, in a moment of stress or humiliation, it erupts, shocking everyone, including themselves. Being warned that this is not a coincidence. The shadow seeks integration, not annihilation. Whatever we refuse to integrate becomes autonomous. It acts out for us. And the more we deny it, the more powerful it becomes. Think of it like a dam. You can hold the water back for years, but the pressure builds quietly. When the structure finally breaks, it doesn't release a trickle, it releases a flood. Our culture, obsessed with toughness, celebrates repression as discipline. We call it control, stoicism, mental strength. But when control means emotional avoidance, it's not strength, it's fragility waiting to be exposed. True self-mastery doesn't mean silence, it means dialogue. It means sitting down with the parts of ourselves we least want to meet and saying, I see you, you belong here. It's not about surrendering to every impulse or indulging every emotion, but acknowledging their reality. Because the moment you see your shadow clearly, it loses its power to control you unconsciously. Machiavelli, though often accused of cynicism, understood this paradox well. The ruler who denies his inner chaos becomes a slave to it. The one who studies it, who learns its rhythm, its temptations, its dangers, becomes resilient. He becomes, in Machiavelli's words, the fox and the lion, cunning enough to understand darkness, strong enough not to be consumed by it. So what would it look like if we ruled ourselves with that same wisdom? If we stopped pretending our fears were gone and instead learned their language, it would look like honesty, like a person who can say, I am afraid, but I move forward anyway. I feel anger, but I will use it to understand what I value. I am not perfect, but I am no longer hiding. That's the beginning of integration. The moment fear becomes fuel and weakness becomes wisdom. When you stop fighting your shadow, you stop being its victim. And in that quiet reconciliation, you discover a kind of strength that no performance can imitate, the strength of someone who no longer needs to lie to themselves. There's a kind of person we all recognize, the one who seems unshakable. They lead decisively, speak with confidence, and seem utterly untouched by doubt. People follow them, at least for a while, but eventually something feels off. There's no warmth, no real connection. Their presence commands obedience, but never devotion. That's the quiet tragedy of the tough leader. They can control, but they cannot inspire. They can be feared, but never truly loved. Socrates, centuries before Machiavelli, understood something profound. Leadership begins not with dominance, but with humility. He said that wisdom starts by admitting, I know that I know nothing. In that confession is an openness, an act of love toward truth and others. Because only when you stop pretending to have all the answers can you truly listen. And only through listening can you lead souls, not just command bodies. Now, Machiavelli lived in a very different world, a world of politics, betrayal, and survival. He saw firsthand that rulers who were too trusting often fell prey to manipulation. It is better to be feared than loved, he wrote, a phrase that has haunted leadership philosophy ever since. But what few remember is that Machiavelli wasn't prescribing a universal law. He was describing a tragic necessity in corrupt times. He knew that when love is absent from a culture, fear becomes its substitute. And yet, what kind of power depends on fear to sustain itself? It's the power of the insecure, the kind that needs constant reinforcement because it's built on distance, not connection. Kierkegaard, writing centuries later, would say that the toughest person, The one who refuses to need anyone is the most spiritually impoverished of all, because love requires surrender, and surrender terrifies the ego that builds its identity on control. To love means to be vulnerable to pain. It means allowing others to shape you, to disappoint you, to teach you humility. But it also means the power to transform others through presence, empathy, and understanding, the kind of influence that no authority or title can replicate. When a person acts tough, they close themselves off to this exchange. They become emotionally armored, incapable of letting love or wisdom flow through them. They may achieve external success, but internally they remain isolated. You can see this everywhere. In relationships where pride prevents intimacy, in workplaces where leaders command respect but inspire silence, in societies where showing emotion is seen as weakness. But the truth is, every act of genuine leadership is an act of love. Love for truth, for people, for the possibility of growth. And love cannot coexist with fear. Socrates' method, dialogue, was an act of love disguised as questioning. He didn't impose his ideas. He drew the truth out of others, as if midwifing the birth of their own understanding. He led by awakening, not by dominating. Contrast that with the tough leader who silences dissent, who fears being challenged. Their control looks like power, but it's actually a symptom of weakness, an inability to face the unpredictability of love. Kierkegaard once said, "To dare is to lose one's ship's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself." The tough person refuses to lose their footing, and in doing so they lose themselves completely. Because without love, without that willingness to be touched by the world, they remain emotionally exiled, prisoners of their own image. To lead is to love is to risk, and to risk is to be vulnerable. So the next time you find yourself trying to act tough, ask, what am I protecting? Is it my pride or my purpose? Because only one of those leads to greatness. And perhaps the paradox, Machiavelli, Socrates, and Kierkegaard all saw in their own way, is this: the most powerful person in any room is not the one who controls others. It's the one who doesn't need to. There's a strange illusion in our culture that fearless people are the strongest. We admire those who walk into chaos without flinching, who seem immune to anxiety or doubt. We tell ourselves that's what courage looks like. But is it? Friedrich Nietzsche would have said no. He understood that fearlessness, the absence of fear, is not courage at all. It's emptiness. Courage, in its truest form, exists because of fear. Without fear, there is nothing to overcome. And those who claim to feel none are not heroes. They are often people who have numbed themselves so completely that they can no longer feel fully alive. When Nietzsche wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he described the human spirit as a tightrope walker, suspended between animal and God, between fear and transcendence. The danger wasn't falling. The danger was never daring to walk the rope at all. And yet, that's what the tough person does. They refuse to step onto the rope. They pretend they're already across. They say, I don't that get scared. But in truth, what they mean is, Aspev, stop listening to my fear. And when you stop listening to your fear, you stop growing. Machiavelli, in his own pragmatic way, also understood this. A ruler who pretends to be invincible invites rebellion. A ruler who admits to limits but learns from them that's the one who endures. Because pretending to be fearless blinds you to reality. It creates overconfidence, arrogance, and a brittle form of strength that shatters at the first real test. You can see this dynamic in everyday life. Think of the athlete who hides their injury to appear unstoppable, only to cause irreparable damage. The entrepreneur who masks uncertainty until their entire venture collapses. The friend who smiles through heartbreak, insisting I'm fine, while their inner world quietly crumbles. Fear, when denied, becomes destructive, but when acknowledged, it becomes a teacher. Nietzsche once wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." He wasn't romanticizing pain. He was naming a truth. Without chaos, without fear, without struggle, there is no transformation. Our fear contains the raw material of wisdom. It tells us where we are fragile, and therefore where we must grow. When we act tough, when we posture as fearless, we deny ourselves that map. We lose access to our inner compass. We become actors in our own lives, playing the role of strength while quietly eroding inside. Carl Jung later expanded on this same paradox, that the parts of ourselves we repress, including fear, don't disappear. They simply find darker ways to express themselves. A person who denies fear might instead become controlling, rigid, or cruel, externalizing the very terror they refuse to face. This is how empires fall, how relationships die, how individuals collapse under the weight of their own denial. Real courage, Nietzsche would say, is not the absence of trembling. It's the decision to move while trembling, to acknowledge fear as part of life's dance, not its enemy. It's what he called amor fati, the love of one's fate, to embrace everything, even fear, as necessary, even sacred, because the moment you stop running from fear, it becomes something else, energy, clarity, a pulse of aliveness that reminds you you're still becoming. In modern psychology, we know this as exposure, the gradual facing of what we fear until the fear itself transforms. In life, it looks like honesty, telling a friend, "Been scared to lose you," admitting, "I don't know what comes next," daring to say, "I stem not okay, but I stem still here." There's nothing weak in those words. They are the foundations of true strength. Machiavelli tests rulers. Nietzsche sifts tightrope walkers. Jung sifts shadow. They stare, all speaking to the same human truth. You cannot conquer what you refuse to confront. And pretending to be fearless may protect your image, but it will destroy your soul. Because fear is instead the opposite of strength. It spets the doorway to it. There's a quiet power we often overlook, the power of gentleness. In a world that rewards domination, loudness, and certainty, gentleness can seem like weakness. It's easy to confuse being soft with being fragile, but that's because we've forgotten what gentleness really means. To be gentle is not to be weak. It is to have the strength to remain calm when others lose themselves to impulse. It is to possess the capacity for destruction and choose not to use it. Aristotle, in his Nicomachean Ethics, described virtue as the golden mean, the balance between two extremes. Courage, for example, lies between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lies between greed and wastefulness. And gentleness, he said, is the balance between anger and apathy, between explosion and indifference. For Aristotle, the gentle person is not one who lacks fire, but one who governs it wisely. Their restraint is not fear, it staves sovereignty. Their softness is not submission, it's the disciplined mastery of emotion. Now think about what it means to act tough. It is, by definition, a performance, an attempt to overcompensate for something we fear lacking. When we harden ourselves, we believe we're protecting our dignity, but in reality, we're often protecting our ego. We think toughness makes us invulnerable, but it only makes us unreachable. A river is soft, yet it carves mountains. The wind is invisible, yet it shapes continents. Even light, the gentlest of forces, bends the fabric of reality. Gentleness is not the opposite of power. It's power refined, stripped of cruelty, purified of vanity, and aligned with truth. Machiavelli understood this, though his reputation suggests otherwise. He observed that rulers who relied solely on fear lived in constant paranoia. Their strength was brittle, their peace fragile. But those who balanced firmness with mercy created loyalty that outlasted tyranny. He wrote that fortune favors the flexible, the one who can bend without breaking. And what is softness, if not the art of bending with grace? In relationships, we often fear that showing tenderness will make us lose respect. So we withdraw, defend, or mock. We use sarcasm as armor, but over time, that armor isolates us. Because love, whether romantic, familial, or communal, cannot touch what is covered in steel. To love deeply requires openness, and openness requires softness. A hard heart cannot connect, cannot forgive, cannot heal. Psychologically, this is what the modern mind forgets. Toughness resists reality. Softness adapts to it. When life changes, when loss arrives, when plans fall apart, rigidity snaps. But those who have cultivated gentleness, patience, and empathy can bend, weep, adapt, and eventually rise again. There's a reason the strongest people you'll ever meet, the truly grounded ones, rarely raise their voice. They don't need to. Their calm is contagious because it's not a facade, it's a practiced state of being. It comes from knowing their worth isn't dependent on control. They can afford to be soft because they've made peace with imperfection. Aristotle would call this the highest virtue, megalopsychia, or great-souledness. It's the serenity of one who knows their value and therefore has nothing to prove. They are slow to anger, not because they lack spirit, but because they have integrated it. In the end, gentleness isn't the opposite of strength. It's its ultimate expression. It's the confidence to stay human in a world that constantly tempts us to become machines. Machiavelli might have said that power lies in strategy. Aristotle would answer, true power lies in character. And the person who can remain soft, who can choose empathy when anger is easier, is the one who has mastered both themselves and the moment. So ask yourself, is your strength making you more open or more closed? Is it helping you understand life or merely resist it? Because if your power requires you to harden your heart, it isn't strength, it's fear wearing armor. Softness, then, is not surrender. It's a higher kind of discipline, the art of staying kind when the world teaches you not to be. At the heart of every human ambition, whether it steps to lead others, to create, to love deeply, or to leave a mark, there is a hidden question. Can I rule myself? We want influence, yet we struggle to manage our moods. We seek control over circumstances, yet remain enslaved by our impulses. We demand order from the world, while our inner world burns quietly. ungoverned. Machiavelli, the so-called prophet of power, saw this contradiction centuries ago. He watched princes rise and fall, not because of their enemies, but because of their inability to master themselves. He wrote that fortune, like a river, rewards those who prepare their banks, those who anticipate the floods of emotion, vanity, and fear that come with power. But most people don't prepare. They react. They live as if strength means controlling everything outside them, when the true battle has always been within. That sets the Machiavellian paradox. The world belongs to those who know how to rule themselves. The Stoic philosophers, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, echoed the same truth, though in a different key. They believed the only thing we truly own is our mind, our judgments, our choices, our interpretations. Everything else, fame, wealth, status, is temporary and therefore unworthy of absolute attachment. Marcus Aurelius, a literal emperor, ruled one of the largest empires in history, and yet he spent every night writing reminders to himself like prayers. Control your perceptions, discipline your reactions, govern your mind, and you govern your life. He knew that external authority meant nothing without inner authority, because you can command armies and still be a slave to anger. You can have the world's attention and still be ruled by insecurity. When we act tough, when we build our identity around appearing powerful, we surrender that inner authority. We become dependent on validation, control, and perception. We mistake performance for presence, domination for discipline. Machiavelli, in his own ironic way, warned against this. He described the prince who builds his image on fear as one who holds a state but never possesses it. He rules, but only conditionally, as long as the illusion holds. The Stoics would say he has mistaken power for peace. Real power, they taught, is not the ability to bend others to your will, but the ability to remain unbroken by circumstance. It's the serenity to act justly, even when no one is watching. The calm to endure insult without losing dignity. The humility to change when reason demands it. That kind of control cannot be faked. It must be earned through daily self-confrontation. The modern mind, overwhelmed by chaos and noise, often seeks shortcuts. We chase optimization, dominance, self-image, the Machiavellian ideal of appearance. But the Stoic and the true Machiavellian sage would both whisper, rule yourself first. Govern your impulses before you govern others. Understand your desires before you chase them. Master your emotions before you moralize the world's. Because if you cannot command your own inner court, your thoughts, your fears, your ego, you will forever be a servant to them, no matter how high you climb. The most dangerous kind of person is not the one who lacks power. It's the one who has it, but lacks self-mastery. History is littered with such examples. Leaders who conquered nations, but lost themselves to greed. Artists who shaped culture, but were destroyed by their addictions. Thinkers who revealed truth, but couldn't live it. Their tragedy is always the same. They mistook ruling the world for ruling the self. And yet, there's stead's hope in this realization. Because once you see that the kingdom begins within, power becomes accessible to everyone, not just emperors or politicians, but anyone willing to look inward. To rule yourself means to understand your nature, forgive your weakness, and align your actions with truth. It means to no longer be swayed by praise or criticism, success, or failure. It means peace, the rarest and highest form of power. So ask yourself, who rules you? Is it your temper, your pride, your fear, your hunger for approval? Or is it something quieter? Your principles, your purpose, your conscience? Because only when you learn to command the storm inside you can you move through the world with the calm of someone truly free. So here we are, at the end of all these reflections on power, toughness, and the hidden war inside the human heart. Machiavelli began this conversation centuries ago with a single question: what does it mean to rule? And we, in our time, still wrestle with the same shadow. We wear masks of confidence. We build walls of sarcasm and ambition, and we call them strength. But the truth, the one both Machiavelli and Jung tried to whisper to us, is that most of what we call strength is only fear that has learned to stand upright. We mistake hardness for courage. We mistake domination for control. We mistake survival for wisdom. But a person who must always appear invincible lives in constant terror of being seen, that is not freedom, that is bondage. To live wisely, as Machiavelli finally understood, is to see the world not through the eyes of fear, but through the eyes of reality. To know when the mask serves a purpose and when it suffocates. To realize that no matter how much power you accumulate, none of it means anything if you cannot look at yourself without flinching. Carl Jung would call that shadow work. To turn toward what you sev hidden, to meet the parts of you that tremble, the ones that cry, the ones that ache to be loved, and to say, I see you, I will not abandon you, because that's where the real transformation begins. That's where power stops being a performance and starts becoming peace. All 6 insights have been leading to this point. The mask of strength is built from fear. What you suppress becomes your master. The tough person cannot love and therefore cannot lead. Pretending to be fearless is the fastest way to break. Softness is the proof of strength. And finally, you cannot rule the world until you can rule yourself. Each one points to the same truth, that strength without self-awareness is weakness in disguise, and that every form of control, every attempt to dominate others, is just a reflection of how little control we have over ourselves. But here's Stets, the beautiful paradox. Once you stop pretending to be strong, you begin to feel it. Not the brittle kind that shatters under pressure, but the quiet, steady kind that endures storms without losing its shape. True strength is the courage to be fully human, to weep, to love, to fail, to rise again. It is the ability to hold both power and gentleness in the same hand, without letting either corrupt the other. It is to act without cruelty, to lead without deceit, to speak truth even when silence would protect you. That kind of strength doesn't rule others. It liberates them. It doesn't need to be seen. It radiates naturally. It doesn't seek control. It creates harmony. Machiavelli wrote The Prince for rulers, but perhaps his deeper wisdom was always meant for souls, for those who seek to rule the only kingdom that truly matters, the one within. So as we end, I want to leave you with a question. Who are you when you stop performing strength? When the armor drops, when the applause fades, when there's nothing left to prove, what remains? If you can meet that person with compassion, if you can lead that person, forgive that person, love that person, then you've already mastered the hardest art in existence. Because the greatest power is not to rule others, but to rule yourself with mercy.